There's a side of me that's just permanently sick to my stomach, feeling I'm being dragged into the abyss of success and that system. On the other hand, there's a side of me that thinks maybe I'm getting away with murder within the system. Maybe I am making a European art movie within the Hollywood system. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe I'll just be caught.
A little while ago, I decided to watch through Terry Gilliam's filmography. Being a fan of Monty Python, I realized that I haven't seen any of his films outside of The Holy Grail and Monty Python's Meaning of Life, which I think he co-directed with Terry Jones, I believe. The next movie in his filmography that I was up to was 12 Monkeys, so I decided just to stick with that and watch that, since his films tend to have quite an interesting look to them in terms of set design, and they always come across as very visually interesting to me. I feel like as his filmography goes on, his films get less and less visually extraordinary, I guess. The Jabberwocky is set in medieval times, so you get a lot of really interesting visuals in terms of just the era it is set, as well as the Jabberwocky design, which only shows up in a small portion of the movie, but it's still very interesting. And then you've got Time Bandits, which, traveling through time, it's all very interesting, which, yeah, 12 Monkeys is another time travel movie, which is actually quite interesting. I think Brazil is by far my favorite Terry Gilliam film, outside of the Monty Python movies, just in terms of visuals, and the story was so impactful to me when I watched it. Terry Gilliam, I do find that he does have a really strong visual sense and visual style, but often for myself, I've struggled to connect just in terms of story and character. Not gonna lie, I was a little disappointed by 12 Monkeys. The future sequences in 12 Monkeys are definitely really visually striking. There's a lot of clocks, a lot of cogs. It looks quite messy, but I do kind of feel that it just looks messy for the sake of looking messy. I'm sure a lot of thought went into it. 12 Monkeys uses a lot of wide lenses, so there wouldn't have been a lot of getting away with just set decorating one small portion of the room. It's huge wide shots. You see the room. It looks like they built a bunch of sets. Like it does look really impressive, but I feel like they kind of just went, it's time travel. Let's just put a lot of clocks in there. And it kind of comes across as kind of goofy, but not in a fun, because I love goofy, but in a fun way. But the story does take itself quite seriously, so it does come off as kind of weird.
It seemed that even by the time I had arrived on the film, that everybody, Terry, Jeff, the producers, must have talked endlessly about the time machine, and yet never quite homed in on it. And it started to happen in daily meetings that Terry and Jeff and I had. And what developed was using found objects, using things that I would literally find in the gutter or in flea markets, coming across some piece of scrap metal or some domestic item and adapting that and making it into something unusual.
It's inspired by a French short film, which I have watched as well, La Jetée. I don't know how to pronounce it, but there you go. I do find it was much more visually striking, even though there wasn't as much going on. They used a lot of lighting techniques to get a lot of really striking visuals, which I just thought was incredible. Most of that short film is told with narration over stills. There is one shot with film, and go watch the short film. It's half an hour.
I don't think this film is La Jetée. I mean, we've done this very complicated, possibly lumbering, clunky, crash, bang version of that. Such a ephemeral connection to it. At least it was, it was the springboard, but the diving board is not the dive. This is the dive, and we're in this triple gainer at this moment with a double flip, and we're about to hit the water, if there is water in the pool. Maybe there's no water in the pool, we'll find out.
I feel like in La Jetée, they were able to they pushed the story with their visuals a lot more than 12 Monkeys did. I think The Fisher King was Terry Gilliam's first film that he didn't write, and then this is the first story that he adapted.
In November of 1994, Terry Gilliam began production on what he calls his 7.5 feature film, 12 Monkeys. Although he normally develops his own projects and works on the fringes of the Hollywood system, Terry comes to 12 Monkeys as a director for hire. He's now part of a commercial film package that includes someone else's script, major studio financing, and some of Hollywood's most powerful stars.
Terry's movies are too big in scope to be anything but films that are intended for a broad audience. And as much as Terry might not want to be in the Hollywood system, he knows he's never going to be able to get the kind of money he wants to make those hugely ambitious movies that his vision is, without somehow involving the studio system. So that's the paradox, isn't it?
It definitely still feels like a Terry Gilliam film. There's a scene set within a mental institute, which looked really interesting. It's more to do with locations, I guess, but the location they picked, like the walls were crumbling. I don't know if they did extra work on that to make it look older, but it looked like a very old building. There were like wired doors, so you kind of felt like all the windows were barred. It kind of felt like a prison, which, I mean, Bruce Willis's character was trying to escape. All the city scenes, there is a sequence in the film where Bruce Willis's character goes outside and he's like collecting animals as samples, and there are like lions and bears walking around, and it was a cool sequence. I watched the behind the scenes film, and just showing them put like snow on everything was really cool. It's cool to see that stuff come together. There's definitely a lot going on in the city sequences in the past, so set in like the 1990s. There's like a sequence where they go into an old theatre, I think, or an old mall. I think it's an old theatre though. And there's like, people selling drugs. They get assaulted in there. And there's a lot of just like newspaper and old furniture and stuff. So there was definitely a lot of thought that went into it. Just more, my issue is with the writing of the film. Yeah, they kind of literalize a lot of stuff in 12 Monkeys from the short film that it's based off. There's a lot of wonder and mystery, and you piecing things together in the short film that I think is lost in 12 Monkeys. It just goes to show that you can make really cool sets, and it can be going into a movie that's not very interesting, which I would say a lot of Terry Gilliam's films are for me personally. Again, love his production design. I know it's not his production design, but I love his visions. Brazil, again, I think is the hits them both. The story comes together as well as the production design. I love Brazil. I love that the whole movie looks the way it does with 12 Monkeys. You're not in the future for very long. It's mainly set in the then present. Like I said, as his filmography kind of goes on, he kind of gets less extravagant, and that might be a budgeting thing. I know that is something that he did struggle with studios.
I had this feeling that the movie should have this kind of feeling of decay of the past with it, and because we didn't have money, we couldn't build a whole lot of big sets, but I wanted a big look for the film. So we decided to use old power plants, old crumbling buildings, and kind of show the decay of civilization within the 1990s as well as in the year 2035.
Yours is really going to be attached on that. Just stand.
So when we got there and we started talking about, well, that machine could be this, and then they started working the script around things we found.
Yeah, just like with The Fisher King, previous film before 12 Monkeys, there were definitely extravagant moments that happened within the film, but most of the film is just set in modern, for the time, New York. And that's fine. You can still tell a story that doesn't have extravagant visuals and it'd be good, but that is something that I always looked forward to in watching a Terry Gilliam film. So it's a bit of a shame that there's not more of that here. I just want to talk about some production stuff that I love seeing in film. I know we were meant to pick a movie that we loved. I do love watching new films and films that I haven't experienced before, so I wanted to try something new. That's why I picked 12 Monkeys, but a film that I always come back to, a couple really, is a couple of Aardman films. I really love the way Chicken Run and Wallace and Gromit: Curse of the Were-Rabbit looks. The production value is just insane to me. All the sets that they build. I love stop motion animation, everything. I know they do set extensions with green screen, but a lot of the stuff is built. Incredible teamwork to bring all that together. Incredible vision, it's insane. I watched a movie recently called House, which is a Japanese horror film from the 70s, and they do this technique where they're on a soundstage and the background has been painted, so there's a nice sunset sequence. I don't know if that would be referred to as a matte painting, because I think the wall has been painted, so it looks really cool, and I would love to try out some stuff like that, where you build a couple of houses on each side and then have a painted background. It's like you can sort of tell that it is a painting, but I just love the way it looks. They did a similar thing in Little Shop of Horrors as well, where they've built this city street, they've painted the street further and you see the sky, and there's a miniature train that goes past, and I just think that is wonderful, and so much work would go into that. I love miniature work. I would love to try a hand in more of that stuff. I'm useless at making stuff. I actually had someone I know make a miniature for my animated project, which I think looks incredible. So they made this little miniature and I animated my characters within the scene, and I just think that's wonderful. It's so fun bringing that stuff together, and I could probably show my sketch, what I showed the person, and I just said, make it. And they would send back some of their production stuff, but they did an incredible job. It's just so fun seeing stuff like that come together. But just seeing how much work goes into this stuff, being a props person, just running from op shop to op shop must be such an insane job. I mean, I've done a little bit for my own short films, but the amount of props that you need to create a scene. There was a New Zealand film that came out recently called Bookworm, directed by Ant Timpson. The opening sequence is just this incredible, it's this bedroom, and there's books everywhere, there's stuff up on the wall. The amount of props needed must have been insane. I think they had 24 banana boxes of books full for that sequence. I don't know how much time they had, but you're kind of just given however much time is needed. So if you've got a month beforehand, that's great, but I think if you've got like a week to get something together, you kind of just make it happen. It's really cool because in my own short films, I guess, and I definitely have help. I have help from my friends and family to make stuff, but we definitely don't have as big of a team as a film production. But a lot of jobs that are designated to one person, a few of us are carrying like 5 or 6 jobs. So it's really cool looking into these films and thinking how big of a job it is, but how everyone's coming together to do their part. I watched 12 Monkeys. Was a little disappointed, but it's cool to think how dedicated the people are. Even though it's a movie I didn't particularly connect with, I can really appreciate the artistic value in this film and the hard work that people put into it. Again, my issue's more with the story, a little bit in actually artistic art design, art direction, a little bit. It's just time travel and a bunch of clocks. That's but everything else was good.